It's good to see everyone. And we have the privilege of closing out today's session. Again, congrats to Jasper and the team for 20 years of All That Matters. We're still on the topic of gaming and esports. We're talking about the state of play. What's next for gaming and esports? Someone just mentioned to me over lunch that, hey, esports gaming is like now a matured industry, like no longer a kid, right? But the audience is still very young, mobile first. So we're going to kind of like dive into some of the opportunities and challenges, especially for some of the brands, those who kind of been in esports, who are looking to enter the space, and maybe then we'll close out with looking a bit at some of the future trends. But first of all, for the intro to our panelists, I have this superpower of like butchering people's introductions. So I'm not going to try to do that. So for each of our panelists, we're going to let you talk a little bit about what you do in your job and what's keeping you awake at night. I'll start with Lanjali Global Gaming for TikTok.
Hi, my name is Landra. Nice to be back here again, and thank you so much for having me. Great to be on this panel. Just very quick introductions. My name is Landra. I am Singaporean but based in Tokyo for the last 12 years. I look after all of operations for global for TikTok Gaming. TikTok Gaming, as I introduced last year on this exact same stage, is very much focused on video content, right, around live as well as short form for the TikTok platform. So I'd like to say that, if you've seen any video gaming content on TikTok, our teams will probably have some level of influence on that as well. Yeah, so great to be here. Happy to kind of share a little bit more about how we have grown in the last 1 year.
Thank you. You don't get away with the question on what keeps you up at night.
Oh. Yeah, so I think there are three key things for me. My North Star goals are, number one, is really focusing on creating quality and quantity of of gaming content on the platform. So there are metrics around those, but I tell everyone that it's just really quality and quantity of gaming video content. The second one is really more about trying to encourage our creators to be both live as well as short-form video creators, right? And I think it's very unique to our vertical versus all the other verticals in the space. So that's the second problem that keeps me up at night from an operational standpoint. And I think the third thing here is, when it comes to our key stakeholder groups of publishers, creators, and users, how exactly do we actually create like a comparative advantage? Or how do I deliver value to our key stakeholder groups, right, that is able to scale as well as be impactful, right? So, this is a huge operational challenge, right, when you have small teams looking at a much larger pool, right? So just to give you some context, right? Just for creators alone, globally, we have 40 million gaming creators, right? So when you have a small team, how exactly do you make sure that your work is impacting all these users, and creators?
Managing 40 million creators in a global role, round the clock.
I don't think that we will it's a huge problem, right? And there's a lot of thinking behind it. And I think that it's a lot of effort on the product level as well as the algorithm level, as well as the operational level to kind of see what the best ways forward, right? So we definitely don't want to take credit for it, and we only be the ones taking credit for it. And I think that at the end of the day, it's a lot of years of learning, right? That has put into where we are right now. Yeah.
Thank you, and we'll come back to you in a bit. Jason Shi, Global CEO for Battlefy Esports platform. So tell us a little bit about what you do as CEO of Battlefy and what keeps you up at night.
So I'll answer your question first. Joint pain at this age. Discovered it a year ago. I'm Jason. I'm a ex-competitive StarCraft player / hacker turned tech entrepreneur and investor. So everything that my engineering parents didn't want to see. In the daytime, I run a company called Battlefy. For those who are not in the esports space, we're one of the largest tournament platforms in the world. Imagine like virtual YMCA. So if you go to YMCA to rent a basketball court, tennis court, and you come to us to rent a virtual court for video games. We power about 400,000 organizations across the globe, 80% of our major game developers, more than 85% of our sports organizations with esports counterparts. So that's all.
Virtual YMCA. We need to dig a little bit further in that, but later. First of all, Jeffrey Chau, Global Esports for Razer. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Jeff, the Global Director for Esports at Razer. Razer is a lifestyle gaming company. We have about 300 million users in our ecosystem. We sell products from the immersive line, which helps gamers immerse more of their gaming, and in the Esports Pro line, which has the latest tech, highest margin, highest price, and that's where I am in charge of marketing that entire product line. And I get to sponsor and work with amazing athletes like Faker. If you guys don't know who Faker is, he's like the Michael Jordan of esports. So I work with a team across the globe, and we activate across all regions and global marketing opportunities. So that's my work at Razer, which has been a lot of fun. Before Razer, I used to be a pro player. I co-founded my own esports team, ran a gaming tech startup, and was a esports shoutcaster for the Asia Games for 2018 when they introduced esports as a medal event, and then now it is officially a medal event for the Asia Games, which is a cool milestone in esports history. And what keeps me up at night? Probably two things. I would say number one is just talent. I think the talent for esports marketing people is very thin. Esports is still new, I think, from a professional level. I think the size of the market has definitely grown over the past 2 decades, but finding great marketers in esports is actually very, very hard. It's a very niche, I think, from a talent perspective, from a talent density perspective. And then I think 2 is tariffs. Let's be honest, the macroeconomic impacts on tariffs for companies like Razer that sell mice, keyboard, headsets that are produced in China and so on has definitely had an impact on our business and our cost structure.
From esports caster, commentator, to working with the Michael Jordans of esports, I love to spend all this time talking about terrorists, but we shall not. But coming back to Lanjo, let's talk about short-form content, right? How is short-form content changing the way players discover games and how fans engage with esports in Asia, even though you have a global role, but I'm sure you have a great perspective on this.
Yep, so I think there's just 2 key parts to this, right? The first part is really all around discovery, right? And the second part would be essentially how esports have pretty much grown on our platform, right? So on the first part, when it comes to the discovery aspect of it, and I think, whenever I'm speaking, I love to use this opportunity to kind of share a little bit more about a growing awareness of what TikTok gaming actually is, right? And I think the one key thing is that when it comes to short-form video specifically for gaming, everyone still has an understanding, and rightfully so, of that short-form content is pretty much anything that is only defined as a minute and below, right? And I think for when we're looking at our content in the last year and a half. So I remember I was here speaking about this, and we just recently formed and officiated like a proper product and operations team around TikTok gaming, and back then we were already seeing like content being a minute and above, and we do see that short-form video gaming content specifically for gaming has been a minute and above, right? And our platform in the last 1 year as well, so, you are allowed to actually create content for up to 30 minutes, right? So it's really around content. When we say short form, it's really about content that is that expands across like anything that's a minute below, a minute to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, and I do think that that's we do see that trend changing quite a fair bit as content becomes more mature on our platform and as creators start to create more quality video content, right? So that's a change that we're seeing quite a fair bit when it comes to short form video content on the platform. Another thing that has been very heartwarming to see as we start growing the teams, building creator case studies, right? And especially around US and Japan, we do see like the short form video content improving in terms of how we're looking at hook and editing, how we're looking at creating like creator archetypes, right? So We have creators that really focus on a specific type of gaming video content, right? And we see this like growing across multiple, I'll say like multiple content types as well. So, very heartwarming to kind of see that. And when you have that increased quantity of quality gaming content from these creators on the platform, you as a user looking into the platform, it's much more easier to discover new gaming content, right? So as opposed to in the past, where a lot of the content has been very meme focused, right, or gameplay replays, which perhaps have very little informational value, you now see creators actually introducing games in a more meaningful way, right, with the proper captions, right, where there's proper, I'd say like start, middle, and end of the video, right? So from a discoverability standpoint, as long as your content becomes more and there's higher quality there, right, more users will watch and discover games. And this has been also validated by some of the publishers we work with and the numbers that we're seeing here. So very heartwarming to see that we are actually moving very high up and growing very quickly around discoverability. When it comes to esports, right? I can just drop some numbers. I was just chatting with our teams that with regards to esports, like right now, we are actually the number one like mobile game like streaming platform, right? Mostly around Southeast Asia, right? And some numbers it also shares that in terms of the overall watch viewership, we have grown 100% since last year when we started. So, very optimistic numbers, very positive numbers that we're seeing, very optimistic about the future with regards to esports. Yep.
Huge growth in numbers, but also in the way creators are introducing games, as you mentioned about discovery. Although I would argue that for gamers, 30 minutes is still considered short.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right? So it then depends on what kind of content you want to create. So with regards to, I'd say like content that has some form of programming behind it, right? We do think 30 minutes is still reasonable and fair, but when it comes to like doing a full-on live stream, right? Like you will see creators go on, and we even have actually protections put in places like do not stream for longer than 5 hours, etc., right? And I think this is very common across the industry too. They were seeing. So when we think about live and short-form content, we also try to discourage people from just pulling their highlights, or not highlights, like pulling their live stream directly and then posting it like without any editing on the platform, right? And we try to moderate these kind of contents down, right? Because we believe that short form contents require a lot more thinking and planning around the programming. Yeah.
I'm sure many in the audience would love to have a deeper conversation with you about how that is evolving. But I want to kind of like move over to Jason. Earlier in the fireside, I think Akshat mentioned that talking about gamer identity, he made pop culture references to ramen and bubble tea. What do you see like in terms of cultural differences between Asian gaming and esports audiences versus Western ones? You kind of like straddle between both the West and the East, right? How do these shape strategies for growth? And then after that, Jeff can add on as well.
Yeah, so I think before we go into the differences, I think we all kind of recognize that gaming is very culturally embedded in our societies today. Like, what Ashkat and Danny were talking about, like how we raise our kids. I teach my 6-year-old electricity through Minecraft, right? Redstones. So it is very much a part of our everyday lives, and it's culturally relevant for a lot of different reasons. So I think in terms of differences, there's I think four like stacks. The first is like kind of just the platform itself. So Southeast Asia in general are a lot more mobile centric as opposed to PC and console centric in the West. And then there is monetization. So Eastern cultures have a lot more gacha systems and pay-to-win systems as it compared to the West. And it really has something to do with like the translation of money into virtual power, if you want to get it that way. And then, of course, esports is actually a lot more mainstream in the Asian cultures. You have certain countries with games that have more than 70% population penetration. I mean, that's like 3 generations playing together, right? You don't really see that right now in the West, although it's changing quite a bit. And then a last difference, I think it's in compliance. And so, like, there are rules around, minors and when they can play and how long they can play in countries like China. There is regulations around, gacha systems and betting in Japan, Korea. Those are much more regulated than there is in the West. So, 4 pillars.
Yeah, Jeff?
Yeah, so Razer is premium priced, right? We're a pioneer in esports. We're also celebrating our 20 years, as well as all that matters, right? And we sell premium priced esports peripherals. So the mouse, the keyboard, with like cool technologies like rapid trigger, our headset with like the lowest latency, like 10 millisecond latency audio, and stuff like that. And a major part of our business is from the West, right? North America and EU drive most of our business when it comes to those premium price peripherals. But what we're seeing with APAC is very strong growth in PC gaming. So Japan, for example, peaked their Valorant Challengers, which is like considered a tier 2, not a tier 1 league, has more peak viewership than the tier 1 league for Europe, right? So we're seeing a massive growth in PC games in certain countries. And it's also country specific, like Jason was saying, like Korea, League of Legends is the second most watched sport or esport in the country, and soccer is number 1. And certain games will drive a lot more attendance in stadiums. For example, I was at the T1. T1 is like the Yankees of esports, right? They are the largest and most well-known esports brand in the world because of their player Faker and their success in esports. And they are able to sell out in their home ground event that they host in Incheon at the Inspire Arena. They were able to sell out a stadium of 15,000 people over both days of the weekend with League of Legends, right? So we're seeing esports continue to grow, and it's shown in our business as well. We've already comped well over COVID, double-digit growth, percentage growth over the past year for our esports pro line. And now global esports marketing is the largest marketing pillar for Razer. And you wouldn't say that, 10 plus years ago, because we sell a lot of productivity, immersive line. Esports is driving a lot of our business growth. And because there's more and more gamers all over the world, and a lot of it is coming from the APAC region. They're growing up, and they go from mobile to PC. And we're seeing like Thailand is a very strong country when it comes to Valorant and PC. So mobile is the largest and drives the most viewership for sure, and it'll continue to. But PC esports is actually seeing rapid growth across the Pacific countries in Southeast Asia. So, and the one last thing I'll comment is, from a talent standpoint, it's also there's economic incentives, because when you join a pro league and you're from the Philippines or Indonesia or Malaysia, it lifts your family out of poverty, right? It's actually a very significant delta versus esports pro in the West or in Europe, right? Esports professional players that are successful and are talented with gaming can literally lift their entire families out of poverty because of the opportunities that competitive gaming provides for them.
We'll come back to this almost mind-blowing point about PC making a resurgence in growth in markets like Japan. But I want to latch on to a point that you made about gaming providing for families, and Jason talked about monetization models in Asia like gacha, play to win, and all that. Can we kind of like just dive a little bit into how these monetization models in Asia are evolving? Anybody?
Yeah, I can add. So previously, in my experience in esports, the past 10 years have been in mobile esports specifically. So I was a competitive pro player, so I understand the market. So they mentioned earlier in the previous talk is mobile is now social, right? If you go on PUBG Mobile, which has 200 million daily active or daily active users, there's a relationship like web where you can actually name someone your best friend, best buddy, and there's a whole web where you can have a social network within the game that you play with these people. And there's of course dating. So dating has been surprisingly a big part of mobile gaming because it's very social, right? And then the other dynamic that's interesting with mobile gaming is not only the accessibility, but if you look at gacha games and all that. 10 years ago, none of the esports titles were in the top 5 most profitable, most highest revenue generating games. Today, they're mostly esports titles. Free Fire, Honor of Kings, PUBG Mobile, they're billion-dollar franchise games, right? You look at like Brawl Stars, Clash Royale, the billion-dollar franchise games that are lasting. They're not one-hit wonders in mobile, right? They're lasting for 5, 10 years, ongoing, and still generating $1 billion+ a year in revenue are the mobile esports titles like Mobile Legends, Bang Bang, for example, right? And esports is not only a marketing arm, but it also helps with the longevity due to the whole social aspect, the viewership aspect, the influencer creator aspect, and the pro player aspect as well.
What do you think, Landra? You got anything to?
No, I think that the key part here is really on the sophistication on how they run gaming campaigns. So if anything, I think that one of my observations here is that when you compare these type of, I would say, live operations-driven games, right? These games have become very complex versus, I would say, like Western-focused games that focus towards a more Western audience, right? Because I would say like Asian audiences are very used to a very campaign-driven model, and the level of complexity of the number of campaigns that are run at any single point in time is really worth a case study for, because that's where all the monetization is coming from. People are paying for the campaigns itself specifically, right? So, if you just open like what some of these mobile titles have been mentioned today, like when you look at Mobile Legends or Honor of Kings for that matter, at any point in time there can be 4 or 5 different campaigns running where you can actually monetize or buy into, right? So it's very, very sophisticated in terms of targeting the right audience and having right packages towards these audiences. Yeah, and very different from the way Western companies look at their games. Yeah.
Thank you. Jason?
I think it's very interesting to put the evolution into perspective, right? So 20 years ago, gaming was a CPG business, right? They're packaging CDs and selling it in store, and you buy it once every single year, and all the executives came from like Coca-Cola, right? So today, it's a services industry, right? It is a subscription type business. And 15 years ago, free-to-play was invented in Asia, and then it took over the world. And if you asked an executive in the West 15 years ago whether free-to-play was going to be a thing over there, they're all going to say no. So really, there's a large kind of global evolution in monetization, but specifically in the East, where there are obviously population and ARPU differences. The free-to-play model works extremely well in terms of like penetration. And gacha systems obviously being one of those. Season passes, which have become more of a global phenomenon, right? Battle passes, cosmetics, again, more of a global phenomenon. And then I think related to like the TikTok ecosystem, like creator monetization, right? The tipping stuff, live e-commerce, fan monetization are all kind of like part of this new generation of monetization.
Lots of new, diverse ways of monetizing that's coming up from what we're seeing. I'm watching time and realize that we don't have that much time to cover the next 50 questions that I have. So I'm going to try to, okay, let's make it a bit more compressed, okay? What are some of the most promising, because I'm mindful we have audience here who's like from brands, endemic, non-endemic. So what are some of the most promising partnership models that you're seeing between the publishers, the brands, the platforms, especially if you can talk a bit or highlight a non-endemic type partnership? Who wants to take a step? Maybe just highlight 1 or 2.
Yeah, I think, so we did an April Fool's where, we're Razer, and we did an April Fool's joke where we made a razor blade to shave, and it actually turned into a multi-million-dollar product line with Gillette. So you actually can buy Razer razors at the stores all over Singapore here, and that's been a very successful product line. Respawn by Razer is a gaming mint and gum that we have worked with Mars Wrigley. So it's a joint venture. It's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity, and it doesn't have caffeine because we realize gamers consume a lot of caffeine, like Red Bull and stuff like that. And it has green tea extract. So it's been developed with Razer specifically for the gaming market, and we help market and introduce it to China. And now it's launched in the United States, and we're looking at new regions. And that's been a very successful joint venture. So I think those two were really cool activations where brands have been able to monetize and activate in a meaningful way with Razer and activate the gaming community.
Very cool. Landra, you have anything? Or Jason?
Yeah, no, so I think for my point though, it's just really more just being very careful about, how you actually associate or how do you define what a gamer actually is, and I can go really into that conversational topic there, but I think the key point here is really about a focus also on the type of content that you want to make, right? And I think as a creator, right, you also should understand like where are you, what kind of direction do you want to make sure that you are building your account towards, right? And the main reason I'm bringing this point up is because a lot of creators tend to just jump very quickly from, okay, I'm doing a review of these game contents, and then suddenly I want to be able to do like non-endemic brand sponsorship related content, right? And that actually can detract from the overall message, right? So my general point to brands also is just to be aware of the creator landscape, right, and to be able to associate with gaming in a more seamless way, right? And I think Razer has done definitely very well in that spot, right? And I think as we were discussing this behind the scenes as well, like Jason, we were talking about like athletes actually doing gaming, and I think that's actually very interesting as well. And maybe you want to talk about that particular point on athletes going into gaming.
Yeah, so even like 10 years ago, it was a bit of a taboo to call yourself a gamer because everybody's a closet gamer. And then today, you have all these musicians and athletes who like actively post online saying, this is what we play. They stream with other gamers and other things. Really early on in our ecosystem, and we are an ecosystem that anyone can come on, utilize our platform to create these events or market them. We saw like MLB stars, NBA stars, like musicians all creating like Call of Duty tournaments for their fans, right? Just out of Twitter, and it was amazing, and so we're seeing a lot more kind of cross-industry collaborations between different parts of the entertainment world, which I think fits the theme of all that matters quite well, and it's part of that sort of a trend.
Well, I think we have time for one last question. I always like to end with a bit of a crystal ball gazing. And if you had to make one big, bold, audacious prediction about where esports and gaming is all going, let's say by 2030, right? What would it be? Who wants to start first?
Okay, I'll start very quickly. So I think for myself, our team at TikTok Gaming have really focused on growing across all the different goals and priorities that we have. Right, one thing that I definitely would like to see is an increased market share of TikTok within the gaming industry. All of us started out in this team, and we built it from scratch, right, with that core goal. So hopefully, right, we will see a much larger market share there, right. And I think the second thing here is clipping, right? I think clipping is a very huge part of how content is discovered at this point in time, whether you're from a live streamer or with gaming or non-gaming, right? Clipping is such a large part of it, and I do think that you'll see much larger impact, right? And more companies doing that in the future.
So from the esports perspective, I think in 10 years or less, every single country will have at least one game that is in the top 3 most watched sport in that country. And it is already happening in a few countries in Southeast Asia, and it's definitely going to be one of those things that we should watch out for, especially because organizations like the Olympics now are recognizing this.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Good for our business. So Razer, we announced like our AI Center of Excellence. So I think if you look at esports, it's a technology story. It came from a lot of map modifications, like the modified current maps, and it became esports games that then developers like Riot, created League of Legends and Dota 2 and Valve, right? So with AI, we're gonna see an explosion of creativity where people will be able to make and develop games more rapidly with a lot smaller, more lean, efficient teams. And number 2 is the coaching part where Razer's building co-AI but it's like an in-game assistant where it really knows you, how you play, what you like, gives you all the game, because with esports, there's patch updates every quarter, every season, and you have to keep up with the patch updates. So this AI will help you stay up to date, but it'll also help you connect with other gamers, right? Because it knows your play style, it knows how you communicate, it knows what you like, and it can match you with other gamers, and it could be a whole new type of social interaction experience, and potentially even, honestly, dating again, right? So I think that the future is pretty bright, and AI is going to help augment and make all the things that are great about esports even better, is how I look at the technology, by 2030.
So larger market share, and having every country having a game that will be the top most watched sport in the country. I think earlier on, besides AI coaching, Jeff also mentioned about the resurgence and coming back of PC gaming as well. And it was quite interesting because in earlier Fireside, they were talking about whether mobile will be like the next PC. It sounds like it won't be. So thank you very much, Jeff, Jason, and Lenja, for joining us today on All That Matters 2025. Thank you.
Thank you.